else stood out for you from the study?
I suppose there's a lot. There's not just one thing. There's a whole pile of different things. There's a whole issue about mobile computing. There's things about how GISWS members see themselves and what they're going to do going forward. There's a huge amount to do with governance, and I suppose the governance industry and how strong that is, and I suppose the need for information security professionals going forward. Software assurance is a huge thing according to the professionals. It's in there, so there's not just one thing, but there's a whole rake of things that are in this study that actually come out and are quite important.
And what conclusions gave you the most concern, if any?
I suppose a couple of the conclusions were interesting. From a concern point of view, I suppose our understanding of cloud computing and how uncomfortable we are with things like cloud computing and social networking. The industry themselves, or the professionals, they don't see themselves well geared up to deal with the threats that these things pose. Not that none of the threats, the opportunities as well that they pose. So they see a big skill gaps in where they are now and where they need to be to deal with these. And that was one of the big concerns for me.
Sure. And did any conclusions sort of take you by surprise and contradict what you thought previously?
A couple of them did, yeah. I mean, I suppose one of the conclusions that took me by surprise was the gap between the pay scales of the GISWS members and the non-members. There's $15,000 to $20,000 of a difference between the members and the non-members, and it just seems like a no-brainer to me. But why wouldn't you want to get certified? So that was one of the things that actually jumped out at me. I was quite surprised to see that on the demographic information that was being provided.
And do you believe, with the threats you were mentioning and the challenges, do you believe the profession is up to the task? And if not, why not? Or if so, what should they be doing?
I think the profession is well up to the task. I mean, I know certainly any of the security professionals that I deal with and that I know, they're well up to a challenge. They love a challenge. And yeah, I think they see this as something that they need to do, and they'll go ahead and they'll do it. I think they'll rise to the occasion, and they'll look at it and they'll go and get themselves skilled up and make sure that we're.
What should executives who are not security executives, what should they take away from the study?
Well, one of the things that I was surprised with was the fact that we as the security profession spend so much of our time dealing with political issues. And I know that from experience as well. We have to be there to convince the business that we are actually a valuable service to the business, because we don't add to the bottom line per se. We don't produce stuff. So I think one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that the executives are fully aware of our value in the organisation, and I think that's incumbent upon ourselves to go and make sure that we evangelise the business, to make sure that they're well aware of the value of the profession. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And let me ask this about Europe. What stood out for you as far as the European data?
I suppose the one thing that really jumped out from the European data for me was the difference in Europe and the rest of the world for mobile devices. So what we see is a much higher number of mobile devices available in the workplace, and people are using the mobile devices, and yet we see it being a much lower security concern for the security professionals, and I'm not quite sure why that is and what we need to do about that. So I think what we really need to do is we need to up our game and look at the way that consumer electronics and consumer devices and mobile devices have come into the corporate environment, and maybe prepare against that and make sure that our policies are written to recognise that fact.
Is there anything you or your organization will take away from the study?
I think there's a huge amount of stuff that's in this. I think that this study is by far the best study that has been done to gauge the amount of the view of information security professionals worldwide. We're talking about over 10,000 respondents to this study, and that's just enormous. And there's some really, really good points that are in there that we can bring back and we can put into our day-to-day business.